Welcome to the Golden Shadow. My name is R.N. Rogerson.
And I'm Melissa Platesy.
Today we're talking about burnout in all its forms. Usually the word burnout is used, or the term burnout, I might say, is used to describe work situations, times when people feel like they are running out of steam or getting exhausted or feeling sort of unfulfilled, running out of patience, situations like that. That's a common description for people who have jobs, people who are in bad work situations or unfulfilling situations, maybe dysfunctional work situations. We're going to kind of expand upon that and describe all kinds of different domains in which you might experience burnout, but probably focus mostly on creative burnout, especially if you are someone who is trying to make a career out of creative work, like being a writer on Substack, let's say, or trying to run a podcast. That's going to be our main focus, since Alyssa and I have a lot of experience in this domain as far as burnout goes. And I'm sure that many people listening to the podcast might have similar experiences or are attempting similar endeavors, trying to make it might be a strong word, but trying to find some kind of success with one's creative work, however you might describe that.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if we can first expand a little bit on the idea of burnout. As you mentioned, it's, I think, most often used in reference to work, which is very understandable. That's probably one of the biggest drivers of stress and overwhelm in people's life. But burnout does appear in all different life experiences. For example, maybe your health has been compromised in some way, or you're pushing yourself too hard, too quickly, not getting the kind of rest that you need. So physical burnout might emerge. Maybe it's more of an emotional or spiritual burnout that you might feel because of maybe you're taking care of a sick loved one, and there's so much worry and intensity, and so much of that emotional energy is funneled into that situation, and you're not getting the kind of rest or care that you need. Or maybe in a relationship, I think relationships can drive a lot of burnout too. Maybe you're with a partner who is demanding or almost vampiric in nature, and that it's lacking that kind of emotional reciprocity. And and I think spiritual burnout is something that's a little bit more elusive, maybe something a little bit harder to put your finger on, but that kind of disconnection, maybe even existential crisis would sort of fall into that bucket. But that feeling of connection, of depth of meaning. And I think when meaning becomes disconnected, or it lacks completely in a situation, that we can start to feel this kind of soullessness that burns us out on life.
Yeah, so if we take the term burnout and we sort of zoom out as much as possible, try to reduce it down to its simplest form, I would say that burnout is any situation in which you're putting in more than you are getting back.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Sure.
probably the simplest way to put it. And I think what can be confusing about burnout, or elusive, as you were saying, or maybe kind of mysterious, is the different sort of resources that we require to live, or to feel content, or to feel happy, or even just to achieve homeostasis, you might say. It can be hard to put your finger on what those are. So any situation in which you're putting in some form of energy, it could be all kinds of forms of energy, and you're not getting back enough energy to
Sustain the
sustain it or
process.
make it feel worth it.
Yeah.
So your needs are not being met exactly. So you were giving a bunch of examples of different kinds of burnout. And so, for instance, the simplest way that people, I think, often think about resources is in terms of money. So there might be a situation in which, let's say, you're trying to run a Substack or a podcast, as an example, where you're putting in a lot of effort, you're doing a lot of work, it is exhausting you, and you're not getting much money in return. And so burnout can come where you start to feel like you are putting in more than you were getting back. But that's just a financial thing. There can be the opposite situation in which you are getting a lot of money, but you're lacking some other resource. Some other resources is not coming back to you through your work. So if you have a job, you're putting a lot of effort, you're showing up every day, you're putting in your time, requires a lot of mental stress, and you're getting paid, let's say, but you feel really unfulfilled. You feel really bored, maybe. Um, Maybe there's something about the job that feels kind of not aligned with your, let's say, spiritual vocation or your true role in life. In that sense, even though you're getting money, you could be getting burnt out because you're not getting enough of that other resource, which is
Right.
something like spiritual resource, meaning, research, feelings of being at home sort of in what you're doing or being in alignment with what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, maybe it would be helpful to use some more concrete examples because
Mm,
you're definitely experiencing, I think, the kind of uh the kind of opposites of burnout that I've experienced in the last 10 years or so. So it would begin for me with being in a normal job. Before I quit and went on this path that I am on now, I was working in the tech industry. I was graduated from college, was in, various roles kind of related to account management and client dynamics and stuff like that, and I was pretty good at it. I was paid decently well. I had health care. And, about 3 or 4 years into it, there was this great sense of what I lacked in terms of depth, meaning, soulfulness, vocational work. And it was something I could not shake. I wouldn't say I got to the point of burnout. I think I quit before I got fully there, but it was like every day was a sort of Groundhog's Day, if you've seen that movie, right? Where it's like every day is on repeat. I get up, I go to work, I do the same kind of boring, almost meaningless feeling tasks. There's nothing deeply touching my spirit or soul in this work. I'm feeling the disconnection, and day after day of experiencing that, I could start to feel how it grated like on my sense of well-being and my capacity to be present in life, to feel that life was joyful. And I wouldn't say that it wasn't worth living because of my job, but I would say that there was this growing sense of almost, I don't know, it's going to sound dramatic, but it was kind of a despair, that almost like, is this what I'm going to do for the next 30 or 40 years of my life? And it was kind of overwhelming when I would face that reality very starkly, like in the face, really look at it. And I could tell how much I no longer had the energy for what I was doing. And that there, at the same time, there was something emergent in me that felt like it was calling me to something else that I didn't fully understand. But I was really in a kind of fast track to burnout, in the midst of burnout, feeling that irritability, feeling like I didn't have what it took anymore to keep showing up in this capacity. And so before I really like crashed and bottomed out, I quit. And, now I'm here.
right.
Before I
So,
give my other version, yeah, let's like expand on that idea
yeah,
first.
hopefully no one interprets this as kind of like a derogatory term, but like you're describing normie burnout, essentially,
Sure,
right?
the
You have
nine
a
to
job,
five worker,
right?
got to climb up the corporate ladder, got my steady income and everything's going well, right? And
Hmm.
and that is a blessing,
Yeah.
to have all of that. And I don't know what it is about me or my, psychological nature that was like, whatever, throwing all that to the wind and jumping off the cliff into the unknown. But yeah, it's the everyday typical path of life that most of us walk. Go to college, go get a job in some sort of, sector that you probably studied for, and then realize, I'm not actually passionate about this. And I think that probably leads a lot of people to sort of midlife crises or, some form of burnout where they feel like they've got to make a huge change, go back to
Hmm.
school, get a new job, things like that.
So you're putting in energy every day, and you're getting back money, and
Yes.
money leads
Yeah.
to, shelter and food
And
and
stability.
stability, all those
Yeah.
things. And so you are getting back something from the work you're putting
Right.
in, but a
Yeah.
different resource is burning low.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's something kind of like fulfillment or
Fulfillment,
meaning.
meaning,
That can
life
obviously
purpose.
could take a lot of different forms, and
Yeah.
a lot of different people find different things to be fulfilling and
Yeah.
meaningful. But for you, the work didn't feel fulfilling.
Right. Yeah.
So
Someone else in that role might have felt really happy and found the right balance, but for me, there was a clear indication that this was not right for me. And despite it providing me those physical or the monetary resources that I need to provide for myself, like have food on the table and to pay my rent and have health care, it wasn't enough. It wasn't sustainable for me.
right. So flip side
Yeah.
is you jump off that cliff
Yeah.
and you embarked on a different path.
A creative path.
And the creative path has a different kind of burnout
Yeah.
that we both experienced. And it's sort of the opposite of
Yeah.
normie burnout,
Yeah.
right? So normie burnout, you put in your work, you get some money back. You don't feel fulfilled necessarily. You don't feel like
Yeah.
your calling is being answered. Creative burnout, let's say, as the opposite, is you're putting in a lot of work, maybe the same amount of work, maybe it's a different kind of flavor of work, and you're getting back a resource, let's say, which is meaning,
Yeah.
fulfillment, or your
Mhm.
calling is being answered in some way. You're sort of
Yeah.
in alignment with your spiritual vocation, let's
Right.
say. You're
Yeah.
playing the role that you're meant to play in life, at least
Mhm.
from your interpretation. So you're getting those resources back, but the money is missing,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a new kind of burnout, a different kind of
Absolutely.
burnout, maybe an opposite kind of burnout, which is like you need the money.
Yeah.
That resource is running low.
Right. Yeah. And the ups and downs that come with that kind of creative work or entrepreneurial work or running your own business is you might, especially in the beginning, it's like, how do you create a little bit of financial stability? How do you get some of those physical resources so that you can, uh, you know, pay pay your rent and afford your bills and things like that. And then maybe you start to have some good months and you're like, wow, things are going okay. Or I got a client or I got that contract. And then, those things aren't guaranteed like your 9 to 5 is. And so then suddenly, the money's gone and there's that deep sense of fear of, is this sustainable? Can I keep going? How much do I have it in me to play every single role? I'm the marketer, I'm the accountant, I'm the manager, I'm everything,
Hmm.
right? And so you're juggling so many things and you're also trying to get financially sustainable to a financially sustainable place. And that I have come to learn is constantly, continuously ebbing and flowing. And it has driven an incredible amount of burnout in the last, especially 5 years for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that are exhausting besides just showing up to work. That can be true for like the normie world, like the office job. We could get into those, but it's beyond for creative work, creative burnout, beyond just the feeling of not getting money back. I think there's also things that are exhausting about creative work itself because things like you don't have there's no boss, you're your own boss. Like that's already kind of exhausting. Like everything falls to you.
Hmm.
You've got to figure out all the pieces. Things that go
Yeah,
wrong are your responsibility. It's exhausting because no one's there to guide you or hold your hand. Like
sure.
the nature of
Yeah.
creative work. This is a whole other episode. I always say this.
Yeah, you
I say this like every episode. It's like this is another episode because it's like I can tell in my mind there's a jumping off point to go in like a different interesting direction in my mind because that's how my brain works. But the thing about having a 9 to 5 is usually if you are consistent, it'll work out.
Sure.
Like if you
Yeah.
just show up and do the work, it's predictable. You know the money's coming in, you have a salary maybe, and you just stick with it, you'll be fine. Whereas with creative work, often consistency isn't enough. It's like actually
Mm,
more of like a science. Like you have to sort of like trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, like try something that fails.
yeah.
Here's a new idea that fails. And you are actually sort of like over time evolving sort of like a niche for yourself. And that can be really exhausting of like there's no map. Like
Yeah.
you can't necessarily follow what someone else has done and succeed with creative
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
Someone else who is running a podcast, you could be like, well, I'm just going to copy Joe Rogan exactly. And it's like, good luck.
Yeah.
Like, you're not Joe Rogan. It's not going to work. Or, this person's running like a podcast about tarot or something like that. And you're like, I'm just going to
Mhm.
follow it exactly. And for some reason,
Right.
like it just doesn't work out for you. And that's because like making it with creative work is like you need to find your unique niche, your unique voice.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to make it is if you do that. It doesn't mean there's not rules to follow that can be helpful for
Yeah, there
making creative
are.
work. Obviously,
Yeah.
people who've like pioneered a certain path creatively or as entrepreneurs, it's kind of like the same thing. Obviously, you can kind of follow a lot of the things I've done, but
Mhm.
ultimately, you're going to run into a place eventually where there's no guidance, there's no map. You're just like walking into the darkness, and you're like,
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is going to work. I don't even know if this is going to land. I don't know if this is going to be a good, high quality piece of art that I'm creating, or if it's going to just land flat. And I think there can be burnout from that, right?
Yeah,
Just like
absolutely.
the difficulty of walking into the darkness, you might
Yeah.
say.
That's where that piece on resilience comes in. And, it's been so long since we recorded that episode. Was it
Which
called The
episode?
Creative Process or something like
Oh, I don't
that?
even remember. You mean not with Andrew?
No, no, not the one with
More
Andrew.
recently. It was just
Yeah.
called Creative
Oh
Process.
my gosh. Yeah, it's
I don't
something
even
like
remember that
that. You
episode.
guys, it's been a long time since
Okay.
we've been recording. I think we talked a lot about resilience in that podcast. Maybe I'm wrong. If not, we can talk about it right now because the whatever resilience is as a resource, it can be tapped and
Mm,
then you burn out. And it's one thing you've said a lot to me. Or a sort of challenge to meet the reality of walking the creative path and
mm,
navigating and charting the unknown is the incredible depth and breadth of resilience that you need to do it. And when that begins to falter because maybe you're, tapped out emotionally, you're tapped out with, financially, you're feeling creatively overwhelmed about what, next step to make or how to change things and then it falls apart, and so that piece of resilience, it's almost like if all of those resources could be maintained, resilience stays in a healthy enough level to fuel the process.
right.
And what I have found is that when burnout is present, resilience is gone for
Hmm.
me.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor for burnout, with the fire,
Yeah,
like
yeah, the image.
is I think appropriate is the campfire, right?
Right.
What
Yes.
we're talking about
Yeah, yeah.
is sort of life. You are a living thing, right? And living things go through a process where they need energy and they uh, exhaust energy was the word. They use energy,
Deplete energy.
deplete energy, they spend energy.
Sure. Yeah. Spend.
There's like an X word. I can't remember. Okay. Anyways, but living things, right? They take in energy, like they take in food, and
Yeah.
then they spend energy doing things like running around and hunting
Expend.
or expend,
Expend.
expand,
No,
expend.
not expend.
I'm confusing myself. Expend energy.
Yeah. Expend energy.
Anyway, so like a campfire, for instance, is like it takes fuel, like
Yeah.
wood,
Yeah.
and then it burns that fuel to create the fire.
Yes.
And there's almost like a balance sort of struck where the campfire is burning and it uses up wood, and then you feed it more wood so it can keep burning.
Yeah.
You could overfeed it, it could turn into a wildfire, which maybe is not the part of the metaphor we need to explore. But that's what life is like. It's like basically you're like a campfire, basically, and you're burning stuff, you're burning fuel, and burnout happens when you run out of wood.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
campfire
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
extinguishes itself, it snuffs out because there's not enough fuel.
Right.
So trying to figure out in all kinds of situations in your life, what's the wood you need
Mm.
to keep the situation going, to keep
Yeah.
the
What's the
campfire
fuel?
burning.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting enough of that wood, you're going to burn out,
Right.
right? And so that can be confusing because there's obvious things like money
Mm-hmm.
or food. Like it's like if I don't eat enough food, I'm going to burn out. It's like that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
If I don't have enough money, I'm like my bank account is going to deplete. I can see the number on the screen going down. I'm going to lose my money and I'm going to lose my house and all that stuff. I'm going to burn out. But there's other things that are like much more mysterious, like in a romantic relationship, for instance, like you brought up, you can burn out,
Right.
but like what's the fuel that you
Mm.
need
Mm.
to not burn out in a romantic relationship, right?
Yeah,
And like that can
intimacy
be
and
really complex. Yeah, it can
communication
be all kinds
and
of things, right?
yeah,
But
understanding and all these things.
right, so you can be in a relationship where you feel like you are putting in more work than you are getting back.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe your partner is really, really high maintenance, really difficult, and they're just sort of, and if you're in a really bad situation, you could be with someone who is sort of like a predator, like where they're actually just sort of consuming your energy and you're not getting it back from them. Maybe they have to have everything their way. Maybe they really want you to be affectionate and show them love all the time, but they won't show it back. You can get into like sexist sort of stereotypes. It's like, maybe if you're a guy, you're not getting enough sex and your wife is still demanding that you do all these things for her all the time and pay the bills and you're responsible and take care of all these problems, but she won't give you the sex you need, right? That's a pretty stereotypical situation. It's real,
Yeah.
but in that kind of situation, you're getting burnt out on the relationship because you're not getting enough of a resource. In this case, maybe just like physical intimacy.
Yeah, well, the love language flows in many different channels. And so physical intimacy could be one, or the showing of appreciation. I don't actually know what those love languages are, but any ways in which you feel that sense of being replenished in relationship. And when you're not getting it, what is happening and why. And, there's something about the fire image that really struck me when considering this, because we talk about burnout, we're using fire language, but the the way in which people experience burnout can be something that's like the slow dwindling, if we're using the campfire image, right? Of it had been alive and roaring and sustaining, and then it doesn't get, the fuel it needs, and it dwindles and dwindles until it's ash and embers, and then poof, it snuffs out, right? But sometimes when we experience burnout, it's like intensity, 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 right? It's almost like the fire's burning too hot, and then I don't know, it burns everything up that was there. And so the spectrum, I guess, is what I'm trying to call attention to, of burnout can be something where it feels maybe like this slow death, of not getting what you need. And I think other times, I think this is really true, especially of really stressful, high demanding jobs, is it's too much going, 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 stress all of the time, working 80-hour weeks. Maybe you're getting paid well, but the resource that's being used up there, I don't know, it's like life, your life energy, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be physical energy,
Yeah,
even.
right.
It's like
You
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 can't
you might crash
stay up.
out, like your body might
Right.
crash out.
Yeah, and that happens. People
Yeah,
get overexhausted, they have breakdowns,
yeah,
they collapse, they have heart attacks, mental breakdowns,
yeah. The
stuff like that.
stress. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, fire, you can continue with the campfire metaphor. It's like, you might have a certain amount of wood that's coming in constantly. Someone's bringing you wood, right? And you
hmm,
know how much resources you have, so you can have a fire of a certain size be sustained.
yeah,
For some reason, you're being a little, getting carried away, or maybe you're like a pyromaniac, you might just build a really, really big bonfire and then you just run out of wood in, 15 minutes
yeah,
and then the fire's done, right? So being able to figure out like how much resources are coming your way and how to use them, uh, you know, intelligently so you don't burn out
yeah,
is, I think, what's tricky. And, it just depends on every situation. So, you can go way too hard in a lot of situations and you can exhaust yourself.
yeah.
And, often that's forced upon you in a really demanding job. There's other situations where it's like you can just get carried away with the work that you're doing yourself
Sure.
and you can, people use substances often to kind of like do this artificially.
Mm.
Like they'll take Adderall or, maybe alcohol or all kinds of things to kind of get into a mode of just like, I'm going to really tackle this project really hard. And then like, they collapse after, doing this for several months. And
Yeah. I wonder if there are some personal examples you could share, because you, I think, have a natural tendency towards intensity of life. And a lot of the things that you put your mind to, you do with a kind of force and commitment that at least for me, is quite unique. There's not a lot of people that I view in my life that have that same amount of the ability to muster the energy and sustain it for as long as you do. And then I
Hmm.
think to
Sounds kind of sexual, but that's not what you're talking about.
it's not what
Or
I'm
maybe it
talking
is what she's talking about, but
about.
she's also referring to other things.
Or am I?
Right. I mean, you could call it is a personality trait of mine that I think has been powerful and beneficial
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. It's also a trap for me. And so, the same things that can make you a really powerful person can also be your weakness. Like that's almost always true is people have this sort of way of being in the world that can be, it can work in a lot of situations, but it can go overboard or it can have like a shadow, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, there's definitely been a lot of experiences for me where I've done something really hard, basically. I've like exerted myself really hard and maybe I've achieved something that's pretty high quality or beneficial to my life or kind
Yeah.
of spectacular, but like burnout has been a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's manifested in various ways. So, I mean, just for example, I was like a very serious long distance runner in high school, and that got me a scholarship to run in college. And I actually ended up quitting halfway through college because it just was too much. It just became something that it went from being something that was like very beautiful and adventurous and passionate for me
Yeah.
to being something that just felt like it was sort of eating away at me. And, there's even physical repercussions to that. It's like I exerted myself athletically as a young person so much that I would get injured. And even now, as I'm getting older into my late 30s, for instance, I'm getting injured fairly frequently in a way
Hmm.
that feels like almost like I might have used my body a little too hard as a young person, like too much sports, too much like very, very competitive sports. And, it's a way of being in the world. I enjoy the feeling of doing things very focusedly, very obsessively,
Yeah.
that kind of rush that you get from really pouring yourself into your work,
Yeah.
whether that was sports or it was music for a while for me, like playing guitar, being in bands,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Can I interject here
Sure.
really
Yeah.
quickly? Because I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the experience of running what in high school and what it was like, and then what it was like in college, and where did the shift happen, and how do you kind of hone in maybe on what was being depleted, in the college years, or, what was kind of getting to that point of burnout to really, emphasize,
Yeah.
what that process was like for you.
Okay. We're going to get into some deep RN lore here. And, some of this stuff is pretty personal, but that's okay. Um, this is good. It's a good example because it's kind of, so this is a good description from where things are in balance
You're right. Right.
to where things start to be out of balance resource wise. And you're always looking in life to be in that balance, right? With everything you do, you want to find that balance of putting in something and getting something back in balance, not putting in a lot and getting back a little, for instance. Anyway, so in high school, running was something that I got into when I was a freshman. So I was about, 13, 14. And it was something that I understood at that age, even that young age, that if you just sort of put in a lot of time and effort into it, you would actually improve over time. I also, was lucky enough to be talented, I think.
Yeah.
Not everyone
Yeah.
could be a good long distance runner. I
Yeah.
happen to have the build to be a good long distance runner. That's just a coincidence, I think, probably. But I was pouring myself into something that was paying me back very quickly. So I was training pretty hard. I would, go out and run around and do that every day. And the mileage is going up and up. And it turned out that I was getting faster and faster, more competitive as I did that. And so I understood that very early. And I just kept pushing, basically. And so I went from being a pretty mediocre runner as a freshman to being the league champion in my area by the time I was a junior. So like the best runner out of all the schools in my area. and that's getting paid back, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's no money involved here,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the whole notion of burnout in the situation, like financially, doesn't apply at all. So it's a good
Yeah.
example of kind of like a spiritual thing where you're putting in a lot of effort, like whether that's like just sort of spiritual effort, like heart effort, but also just like physical, like your body, and you're
Mm-hmm.
getting paid back. So you're winning races.
Yeah.
You're getting attention from people who are, patting you on the back and saying, wow, like good job. You're getting attention from your guy friends and teammates who are really impressed, and it's kind of like more of a macho, like, whoa, like nice bro, like you're like kind of a badass. To like, attention from girls who are like, oh, I've never noticed Arm before, but you know what? He's pretty hot. Like, look at him, like fast runner. It's like those kinds of things. Those you're getting paid back
Sure.
for your
Yeah.
effort,
Yeah.
and it feels good.
Social resource.
Social resources,
Yeah.
sure. Attention, feeling of affection.
Yeah.
Also getting attention from like the city, like being in the paper.
Right.
People are like writing
Yeah.
articles about me and stuff like that. It's like there's all these things like that feel really good, feels really fulfilling, and it's not even. I don't want to say it was like mostly a vain thing of just like yeah, like I'm cool now. Like it really just felt really good to get out there and train and have it pay off. And I
Yeah.
think most people can relate to that if they've tried to be in sports at all. I think guys especially like really feel turned on spiritually by physical prowess.
Hmm.
And if they can achieve that, it feels really, really good. Anyways, so I'm putting something in, I'm getting a lot more back than I'm putting in. It's a good deal. Running's a good deal for me. It's the opposite of burnout. I'm feeling like pumped up, like I'm ascending, I'm getting what I need. I feel really good, really excited. Anyways, you get to college, and for a lot of reasons, I went from being in high school to being in a Division One competitive situation, which is like the top, it's the top level in college. So it's really, really competitive. I mean, the only place you go up from Division One is, you become professional after you graduate. Not to say everyone becomes professional, but still, it's like very high level, very elite. So already I'm in a pool of people that I'm not as competitive anymore. In fact, I go from being from the top to being kind of at the bottom, right? And then we're having to train so hard that we don't have much time for anything else. It's no longer a sort of individual sport to me. It's not just like Arn goes out and he sort of journeys through himself, through his spirit, and becomes stronger, becomes faster. Kind of like in Dragon Ball Z almost. It's just like, oh, I'm training and I'm getting stronger. And like it feels really good and really beautiful and adventurous. It goes from that to being kind of like a cog in the machine where you're
Right.
one
Yeah.
of several athletes and the coaches are using you kind of as a tool and you have to do exactly what they say.
Which, for those who don't know, I don't think you've said this, but your experience in high school was you were really creating your own path
Mhm.
and sort of charting your own path.
It was a very creative experience.
Yeah.
Sports like as art like sounds a little pretentious,
Mm.
but there is something about you're creatively sort of exploring this sort of unknown domain and you're
Yeah.
finding your way through it and it's working out.
You sort of created your own training schedules. You didn't really listen to the coaches much. You sort of found
Yeah.
a path that really worked for you and you had success with that.
Yeah, it was definitely self-created.
You
I didn't, I wasn't
self-created.
like, I wasn't really, I had coaches, but some people, they become like good athletes because they actually have like their parents paying for like special coaching or special attention. And I didn't have that. I mean, my
Yeah.
parents were encouraging to me, but they didn't really help me do this. The coaches were encouraging, but they didn't really help me do this.
Yeah.
They weren't used to kind of like this level of competitiveness. I just sort of went out there and had a spark of an idea of like, this will be good if I do this. And I was right. And college, it became different. So you're part of a machine. You're not really getting the results that you got back when you were in high school. You're not getting as much attention. And there's also expectations in Division One that like, for instance, you're not going to go out and party as like a freshman in college.
Okay.
Like no drinking.
Hmm.
Saturday morning, you're here on the track, ready to train. It's kind of like, well, I'm sacrificing like my social life in college, like for this. It's like, okay, I guess I can do that. But that's a resource I'm not getting back. And then academia, even I would say, is secondary to sports at that level, and like that you need to go to class, but like really like your main thing is running. So it was kind of consuming in a way that did not feel very spiritual and fulfilling anymore.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was sort of like a tool in a toolbox
Right.
rather than sort of on like my own adventure.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that everyone who goes to Division One college is going to have this experience,
Of course,
or that
yeah.
like it's soulless. Like being on a team is like, so it's like that. Obviously it's not soulless, but for me, for some reason I got burnt out and
Yeah.
then I quit.
Yeah. And would you say that that allowed you to reconnect eventually with running as a spiritual practice?
I never really got back into running in the same way, but I had to find different outlets for getting back to that adventurousness
Yeah.
and that kind of that, I'd say heroic energy, hero's journey,
Yeah.
venturing out to some domain, kind of just like to figure it out on your own. That's something that like I've always been in love with. And so
Yeah.
that's like why I love the creative realm because
Mm.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but as we're saying, the creative realm is full of perils and monsters and the abyss, and it's not just like a walk in the park. It
Yeah.
just feels good all the time. And often, if you're doing creative work, you journey into that part where you're in the abyss and you never come back, right?
Mm.
And that can
Yeah.
come from burnout.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's normal for a lot of people to try to make something like creative work or passion sustainable, make it their job. Or in this case, you take something like the passion of running and you're building, your at least your college experience around it. And what happens when that thing that you love so much has to sustain all of these other aspects of life,
Mm-hmm.
and the passion gets drained from the experience, right? Or something that started out as like you're a painter and you've decided you're gonna, take a bet on doing that creatively, put your stuff up on Etsy or, do shows at local art studios, and then suddenly that thing that you loved and were so passionate about becomes a job. As you said, it's like it becomes sort of hollow or a cog in the machine, or it loses that creative vibrancy. And that's kind of the gamble that we take with saying yes to some form of creative or artistic expression, instead of say, maybe I'm not passionate. My vocation is not being a nurse, but it pays the bills and I can paint on the side and it stays this thing for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it never is sacrificed, to the career gods or something like that.
Yeah, I think burnout can come from falling out of alignment with, the original reason that you started doing the creative
Mm.
act.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, it's why it's anyone who's ever curious about sort of taking the leap and trying to become an artist, instead of having a more predictable path through like a normal job, let's say, they should really try it because you find often that's not what you think it is. And it's way more difficult than you thought it would be. And it actually resembles a lot more closely a job than
It's
you thought it
true.
was.
Yeah.
And so I think people who really have not explored creative work at all can sometimes confuse themselves into thinking that like it's basically just really fun the entire time.
Yeah.
Or like, oh wow, like wouldn't it be really fun to be like a painter and you just get paid to paint, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the successful ones, what about like Vincent Van Gogh?
Yeah.
And like, oh, it'd be really fun to be him. It's like, no, he fucking shot himself. What are you talking about? It's
Yeah.
like it's not a walk in the park at all. It's not. It's you're maybe pursuing your passion, and the ones who are successful really maybe do just feel so passionate about it that all the work on the side doesn't really matter to them. But it's impossible to do creative work and not have it turn into some sort of grind if
Yeah.
you're trying to make it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for me with my work, that in this tail end after leaving my full time job and trying to pursue, the interests and teaching and doing this podcast and all of that, that those moments of burnout have felt, sometimes like they are robbing the beauty out of what feels so meaningful to me. Um, but it doesn't always last. And I guess that's what's been interesting for me is I've not, at least at this point, reached the critical level of burnout where it's like it absolutely has to stop. There's no way to go forward. I feel like whenever I hit that, I tend to discover a kind of new level about myself, or and this I think is maybe more about me than other people's experience. But when this happens, there tends to be some sort of experience with the unconscious that I have that
Hmm.
totally reorients me. As an example, a few years ago, I can't remember when, I guess this might have been around 2021 or 2022. Anyways, I guess we were doing the podcast at the time. I was teaching my classes. I was mostly on Instagram in terms of business connection and networking. And I would teach a class usually every month, and I would put out the word on my Instagram. People would sign up, but it was this like really unhealthy cycle basically where I didn't have a good business set up. I didn't have a newsletter going. I only had to reach, the audience maybe through a podcast episode or maybe through those announcements. And I would find that, people weren't seeing those announcements, and the cycle I was in was leading to a ton of burnout because, people wouldn't sign up and then they'd say, "Oh, I never got that announcement. I really wanted to go." And there was just an incredible amount of frustration happening. And so I stopped teaching actually for, I think, 6 months. I had to just totally put it on pause. And I started really considering, is this path worth it? Do I have it figured out to keep going? What should it look like? What should be different? And really sitting with this idea of maybe walking away. And then I had this dream where I was giving a lecture in front of an audience. And in the audience was Marion Woodman, who is a Jungian analyst who is very deeply influential and impactful for me. And
Do
after
you know
the,
what she looks like?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I noticed her in the crowd. And then afterwards, she
Hmm.
came up to me, and I forget the exact words, but the sentiment was, "Your work matters." You know, like it was like a keep going. Your work matters. What you're doing in the world is powerful. And I just woke up from that dream and felt completely regrounded in the vision and completely regrounded in like the creative inspiration. And and
That's nice. Wish it was that easy.
I know.
Just go to sleep.
Yeah, just go to sleep. So well, sometimes for
All your problems are
me,
solved now.
yeah. I think when you cultivate such a deep relationship with the unconscious, that you can touch into parts of your own psyche that are resource when you're lacking resource. And that can be difficult to do. But if you're someone like me who I think is so naturally oriented, like super intuitive type, really drops into those spaces very readily and feels them and their power as if they are like divine messengers, it's almost like, okay, I'm back on the path.
Hmm.
And that has happened to me several times when I've been wavering or when I've been in burnout. Of course, it hasn't sustained me. Since then, there's been many more cycles of burnout. But it's to say that I think sometimes the resources that you need or what you're being called to is to recognize maybe where the issue is, where the misalignment is, and maybe there is an outer change, like leaving your job, like I did, 10 years ago. Sometimes it's an inner change, or it's a meeting of some part of yourself that you didn't know was there, that can be that resource that can replenish you and makes the path forward clear and accessible again.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge um, with something so slippery and mysterious as
Yeah.
creative work is being able to discern what is the resource that you're not getting and how can you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Often it's money. I mean, that's kind of simple, right?
Yeah.
Um, but burnout I think is pretty inevitable in every job, every vocation, probably
Yeah.
every part of life, every domain in life is going to have some form of burnout because every domain is, some sort of energy exchange that's happening. But like you're saying with creative work, how do you figure out the thing that you need to make this feel worthwhile and make it sustainable? And, a lot of creative work is full of illusion. Like you are getting exhausted because you are perceiving things improperly,
Mm.
right? So you might need to get right with like, what's the thing you're actually trying to do?
Yeah.
What is the reality of the thing that you're trying to do? Is it what you think it is? Do you think that being a professional musician is actually like the way that you imagine it? Or is it actually a lot more complicated and kind of, you know, just sort of a slog, or you kind of need to like get your hands dirty or something like that? It's like you might not understand the reality of the thing you're doing. You also might just be perceiving things much more harshly than you need to. I think, for instance, creative work involves an audience usually. If we're talking about like resilience, like we were talking about before, it's like it's really important to be able to be in the right relationship with your audience, which means not taking criticism too seriously, not taking negative feedback too seriously. It's like you can definitely feel burnt out if you like worked really hard on something creative, like you wrote an article or you recorded a song, whatever. You put it out there on the internet and people just start shitting all over it.
Yeah.
It's like that's a very common experience. That can feel exhausting, but what you have to do is understand that, like, well, that's just the internet. The internet is extremely negative. People who respond to things tend to do so out of negativity more than positivity, usually.
Mm-hmm.
And you just need to kind of get into the right perception with what this is about and what it's like. So, for instance, for the podcast, it's like the amount of comments of people making fun of my voice like outweighs the positive comments of like, this was good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate this episode. It's like it's mostly just like, oh, this guy sounds like a fucking frog or something, or he talks funny, like lots of those comments. And if you're not resilient, those things can make you feel burnt out.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I'm putting in all this work, I'm not getting paid for it, and it's just so people can make fun of me.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's like that's burnout right there for
it's
sure.
painful.
But you can kind of get your head in the right place to like be able to like ignore those comments and just be like, well, there's just stupid people. Like I might as well interpret those as just being like bots, basically, that are programmed to say stupid things.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. But
Yeah.
so it can be hard to figure out what is the resource I need to make this sustainable and how do I get more of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there can be all kinds of strategies to find that thing. And that's, I think, like really at the heart of burnout is what's the thing you're not getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then can you action something around that? Because the moment that the burnout makes itself truly known is the opening, right? And I think for some people, they might feel that they're locked into a system or a situation that they can't change, especially when work is the burnout. And it's like, how do you change that? Because if you quit your job, if you go on leave, you might not, get that paycheck anymore. And so they get stuck in this terrible cycle, right? Where they are chained to this, this job or this, experience that is completely depleting them. And that's when things are really tough, right?
A lot of that's just perception too, though.
Yeah.
It's like if you're in a bad situation, you can probably figure out a way to get out of it in some way. I mean, it's very rare that someone is like, I am just totally stuck.
Yeah.
There's no options for any change in my situation, and my situation is horrible.
Yeah.
It's like, that's rarely the case. So it's like, have you tried talking to your boss and expressing this? Have you tried taking a pay cut to go do something else? Have you tried going on vacation for a while? Have you tried fixing things at home first? Or if you tried something more extreme, which is have you tried quitting your job?
Sure.
A lot of people are just like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You might say, why not? It's like, well, it's too scary. What would I do? It's just not as scary as you think. I think that's the challenge is often trying to resolve these issues with the situation I'm in, whether that's, creative work or professional work or a relationship, is people are afraid of what might happen if they rock the boat or change something.
Yeah.
Or like my house of cards just like collapse if I move this card, and I think that's like very, very rarely the case. So you have to be a scientist about your situation. You need to try things and see if they improve it. And if you try and try and try and try and try to improve your situation and to have your needs met and it still doesn't work, maybe you need to quit, whatever that is. So if you've tried to fix your romantic relationship and if you've really, really tried all these different things for years, let's say, and it's not working, get a divorce, If you're dealing with your job, quit your job. If you're doing creative work, if you are really, really trying and failing and failing and failing, and you can say that I actually approached this like a scientist and I did trial and error and I tried all these different things with my creative work and nothing worked out, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you should quit and get a real job. There's all those things can be true. But the thing that you can rely on is that the process, which I would say is the creative process, is one of like willpower and heart and resiliency. Is like keep trying, keep falling down and getting back up.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take a little bit of like an archetypal sidestep here really quick because
Archetypes.
in thinking about burnout, and this is actually a thread that I have been sitting on for a really long time, and maybe when this episode's released, I'll do an article around it too. But the idea of burnout and the link to fire and that language, I've I've tried to map it alchemically because fire is such a potent element and tool in alchemical transformation. And in the early stages of beginning the work, they often employ fire in the form of the operation called calcinatio, which is this intense burning, incinerating of the prima materia, usually till it's reduced to some sort of fine ash or to a blackness. And so it's intense, intense heat, intense fire. And in what ways might burnout be part of a transformational process? That is a question that I'm sitting with and I'm wondering because I think a lot of times when burnout shows up, it's forcing something to shift or change within us, within a situation, and it's trial by fire.
Mhm.
So it's not easy. And we're walking this really, really fine line between it feeling like total destruction versus the phoenix dying in flames and being reborn. But alchemically, that kind of fire is related to that kind of rebirth process, that something in its old form is dying, changing, its structures are being burned down until you get to some sort of core essence, which might be, wow, I'm not passionate about this job and I never was, or this relationship is no longer serving me, or, I can't sustain this creative dynamic and I know I need something else. So it's like you're being put into that alchemical furnace and you're getting cooked, and if it goes too far past the place of, well, maybe I shouldn't say it goes too far. If it burns out completely, but it's not connected to the regenerative process, which alchemy is, because after you burn the thing, you kind of bring life back to it. You might, submerge it in a healing bath and it moistens and it comes back to life, right? And so it has to be connected to this cycle of sort of death and rebirths, we might say, or destruction and reconstruction, or what is the transformational pressure that's happening here. And I don't know if that's always something that comes to mind, but I do think it's relevant because for me, when I've experienced that, I think I was being called to realize, in the case of like my full-time job, it was to align with a deeper, more meaningful path. Or when it was the creative burnout, it was like, I needed to rebuild the structures of my business. And I could have just quit. I could have just kind of bottomed out in that place, but I was being, I think, forced to see truly that I hadn't built things quite right. I was in a process of things evolving, and this was part of it. It was the destructive part of it. And since then, I've made changes that have helped me feel like I have more of the resource or the resilience to keep going.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of different angles you could come from. It's always, philosophy is tough because it's always sort of like, what is the thing we're actually talking about? And like,
Okay.
what is burnout actually? Like, what's the word burnout actually referring to?
Mm,
It's just a word. What's the thing, the phenomenon underneath it's referring to? And that can be kind of tricky. But I feel like you're describing sort of burnout as when an, let's say, invisible exhaustion or implicit exhaustion becomes explicit.
mm,
So maybe you're in a bad situation and it's actually eating away at you, eating away at your soul or eating away at your energy. And burnout is actually like when it becomes explicit, where it's like, whoa,
yeah. Can't ignore it
something's wrong
anymore.
here, and maybe that's from the outside people observe that like you crashed and burned just now, or, you feel it yourself of just like, I can't do this anymore. I have to bail on this. I'm done. It's when something that's not working for you gets to a place where it can't be ignored anymore, maybe let's say, which is sort of an interesting way to look at it. Um, I think certainly burnout can be a sign that, for instance, the thing that you are doing does not work for you.
Mm,
You need to change, right? and you won't acknowledge that you need to make a change until it's obvious, right? So if you're just going to your job every day and everything's working, at least at a like minimal viable sort of level, you're not going to make any changes. But, if you show up to work and you just like find yourself, like maybe you actually literally just pick up your computer and like chuck it at the wall or something like that, it's like, whoa, like this isn't working for me. And like, I need to make a change. And that's what pushes you to actually quit your job. And if you quit your job, as painful as that might be, of just like, wow, I went down this path for so long and it just like led to a dead end. It's like, that's really difficult to admit to yourself. Sunk cost fallacy, right? I've already invested so much time in this path. How could I possibly abandon it now? What a loss that would be to admit this doesn't work for me. And yet, if you burn out, you have to admit it.
Right.
And like life is actually full of that. It's like everyone, if you really, really examine your life very closely, it's like very few people don't have the experience of trying something that they invested a lot of time in and having it fail. I mean, like, oh, wow, what a loss. Whether that's a relationship or a job or, creative work, it's like you can, for instance, you can, I tend to be like pretty philosophical about this. Like I invested a huge amount of time playing music, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. I was so into it. And eventually I just walked away from it like almost entirely.
Yeah.
And so it's like the difficulty of being like, well, what was all that for then? What was all that music for? Like, where did it take me for me to just sort of put it down and walk away? It didn't result in money. I didn't like make any money off of it. So what was the point, basically? That can be like a really scary thing to admit to yourself. But like, what's the alternative? Is like you just keep going in this direction that's not working for you until what? Until you die or something like that? Or until it consumes you or there's no turning back? So I think burnout in that sense can be that kind of revelation of like, there's a change I need to make. And that's healthy and good.
Right.
That, like to make that change.
Yeah.
And maybe you wouldn't see it if you hadn't had that fire sort of, explode or consume you or something like that.
Sure. Another example in the tarot, the wands, which is represented by the element of fire and surrounds themes of inspiration and life energy and willpower and force and excitement, begins with the ace, right? And so there's the spark of opportunity, the opening, the creative draw to engage, and then you expand and you go. And the ending, the 10 of wands, it shows a kind of burnout. This individual carrying 10 wands upon their back, a heavy sort of burdened image. And it's interesting to consider what it is about this really dynamic path that has this link to burnout woven into it. Something within the structure of the creative, energetic life force has this kind of like the two poles almost of excitement in the opening and in the new beginnings and the expansiveness that comes when you touch into the creative fire, and then the burnout and the exertion, the overexertion, the feeling of becoming disconnected from that kind of central fire in the 10 of wands. And so there's something very embedded about that in the experience itself. And of course, throughout the wands, you see, the movements that felt expansive and beautiful and grounding and nourishing. But to me, it sort of says that no matter what, at some point you're gonna get there. But what is it teaching you? Because when we get to the 10 of wands, it isn't, well, this is your fate and you're stuck here. It's about recognizing it so that the cycle can shift and begin again, and you move back to the ace and things open and expand and reignite once more, and you're back at it.
Yeah. That's, a different way of looking at it that I think is interesting. I think the creative process or any sort of process that you're involved in, it's going to inevitably lead to a place where you start to feel tired. And you don't stop at that point, right? If you're actually trying,
it's easy to want to stop there.
Right. And if you're doing something recreationally, you don't go past that point of like, oh, I'm bored of this.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're actually doing real creative work deeply and you're trying to produce something that's elegant and has value, or, let's say you're trying to make it or whatever, it's like you're going to inevitably reach a point with your creative work where it's going to start to feel exhausting and you have to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's part of the cycle. And probably I would say that like really like the best art was probably created as a result of achieving burnout at some point,
Mm,
right?
yeah, that's
And you
interesting.
could debate that because it's like, well, consistency is going to get you the best results over time, and it's like, yeah, but a lot of the really amazing pieces of culture that have come out through history are probably the result of someone just doing something that's like kind of fucking insane, basically, and they either drive themselves insane or they exert themselves, or they just like muster up this amazing energy to put something into existence, and then they collapse afterwards and they have to take a break, right?
Yeah.
And the creative path, because it's a path of passion, probably inevitably requires that
Yeah.
you muster up a bunch of energy, you spend it, and you collapse and burn,
Yeah.
basically, and then hopefully you take a break and then you start again. And
Yeah.
like that's the process. Is it's one that feels almost painful, or that you suffer as you do it.
Yeah.
And if you're going to try and avoid that pain, you're not going to do anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
So that's another way to look at it, even though that might contradict things we said earlier in the episode of like, you're trying to find a balance of resources. It's like, well, yeah, but you could also do the opposite and just like, but I think
Many
there's a truth
truths.
there,
Yeah,
right?
there is. There absolutely is. And you can't live all of life that way, I guess, is maybe a good disclaimer.
No, it's not possible.
It's not possible. And so maybe you're maintaining a kind of homeostasis and recognizing the missing resource and replenishing it in certain areas so that you can funnel and pour so much into another area should you feel called to such a creative archetypal path. Because
Yeah.
not everyone is, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I mean, like the path inevitably involves like a bunch of guys beating each other with sticks and
Yeah,
stuff, right?
he means the Five of Wands.
Oh, is that what I mean? Anyways, yeah, obviously this episode's kind of about our current state. Neither of us are in normie jobs, and
No.
neither of us are getting all the resources we need to live off of. So it's very topical in that
Yeah.
way, that like there is sort of like that creative dance that's happening that feels a little exhausting, a little overwhelming. There is burnout that both you and I have been dealing with for the last several years, and the podcast has experienced that burnout in
Mm-hmm.
ways. It's like there's a reason there's been breaks that have been taken with the podcast for long periods of time. There's reasons we've come back to it. There are sort of moments of building up and then breaking down that happen naturally with creative work,
Yeah.
and we are at sort of a junction again, I would say, because it is cyclical with our creative work. That's sort of like, is this sustainable? Can we keep this up?
Yeah.
Are we burning out?
Yeah.
And when do you say enough is enough and you quit? Or
Right.
when you say that cycle's done, gonna keep going, time for a new cycle?
Well, I think we've had a bit of an Ace of Wands recently, but with coming back to the podcast, right? Because we could have just sort of left it in the ashes of it's been years since we did a podcast, but there was that calling again. Something about that creative pull and touching into it, suddenly it feels like there's new lifeblood, which is very ace like, is like, something has emerged here. There feels like there's opportunity, there's excitement, there's this feeling of depth. And if you were to grab hold and fall into it, that something is going to be born. And we don't know where that's going to go. Hopefully not 10 of Wands right away, but
10 of Swords.
oh yeah, there you go. 10 of Swords, maybe 10 of Cups. Who knows?
Ah, maybe 10 of
or
Cups.
10 of Pentacles.
Yeah. Those ones are positive. The other ones are negative.
Yeah.
The masculine tens are kind of.
They're in, yes, the swords and the wands are very intense, but they show important truths of life. And to bring it back to alchemy, maybe as a nice little, circling back to that, those moments or experiences of life that feel almost the most troublesome, the most challenging, the most overwhelming is usually where we're learning the most about ourselves or growing the most or tapping into something really powerful. And I think that helps me reframe a little bit of what those moments of burnout are like, or what purpose they serve, what's being called to, and why, is that very rarely in my life, at least, I have found that something that felt so depressive, destabilizing, destructive was just that and only that. It usually was connected to something, a greater cycle, a bigger path of meaning. And when I could realize that and see the link or kind of move with that link, it helped me navigate through that experience and eventually get out of the burnout. If you're interested in reading my writing or attending workshops on inner work, archetypal studies, and Jungian psychology, check out theartemisian.com.
If you want to follow my writing, go to rnrogerson.substack.com.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.